And welcome back to our next session with our very own Nate Rosen. Nate, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you?
Nice. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. But I want to put more of the attention on yourself. Don't deflect here. So let's start off a little bit. Give the audience a little bit about your background and what you're doing right now, Nate.
Yeah. I've been in the CPG and consumer brand space for a while. I've worked at brands, worked at fintech companies, worked in advertising. Now I am, let's say, independent. I am working on my newsletter. It's called Express Checkout. Covers the weekly news in the world of commerce. So CPG and consumer news, retail news, supply chain news, e-com news, funding news, trends and reports, a little bit of everything. Um, and I'm also working on a new CPG brand with a friend. It's in the coffee space. It's a nice light product. It's not coffee, but it's good. We're raising right now. We're building out our e-com site. It's exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've been doing the newsletter for how long now?
Uh, today's issue that's going out will be issue 50, so almost a year.
Congrats, that's awesome.
Thank
And
you.
I will say for the audience, like there's a ton of information on there. So I mean, first and foremost, I think if you are any sort of CPG brand fan, like please subscribe. And that's how you started, right, Nate? Like it was primarily based on CPG, and then you've kind of expanded a little bit to supply chains and
Yeah,
so
so
forth.
originally it was actually like my original thesis was I'm just going to do CPG news. And then I was like, some other people are doing CPG news already. I like what they're doing, but I also like supply chain news and e-commerce news, and like I just liked all this other stuff because I was seeing it all the time, and sort of came to this conclusion that I didn't feel like a lot of people were talking about it really as this like ecosystem and connecting all the dots from the news perspective. I think Future Commerce does a really good job at talking about this as an ecosystem and putting together really interesting thought pieces and deep dives and podcasts about it. But I think from the just like straight what's happening in a week piece, I felt like there was some room to play there. So that's sort of like where I positioned myself. Also because I wanted to keep up to date with everything, and this was the only way that I would keep myself accountable.
There you go. Well, it's great. So again, I will say to everyone, like, please subscribe to Express Checkout. There's a lot of good information in there. So let's kind of keep this information focused, and sorry, the session focused more on CPG. And I guess
Yeah.
the first question I want to ask Nate is, you know, how do you see consumer interactions kind of making an impact, and how is that kind of evolving in the last few years in CPG?
Yeah. It's been interesting, especially with the pandemic, where it's gone from we were a little bit offline, but there was a lot of this interactions, especially within like just from ads,
Yeah.
and then we went fully online, and the really strong emphasis on subscribers and CX, and we saw a lot more people just talking about CX. I mean, Eli and Jess, and they like really doubled down on sorry, CX, not
You're
CS.
right.
I used to work in CS, so that's why. But in CX. And now I think it's still really important, but now I think it's transitioned more in person, at least for specifically like food and bev CPG. You need sampling, you need in-person activations, you need somebody getting their hands on the product, and that in-person CX is like a lot more, and then that in-person relationship is a lot more um, impactful and important. Uh, but online is still vital too, but it's usually through different channels now rather than like potentially just on the site. So maybe on like interactions through TikTok or through social media.
And I guess I'll preface this with which the answer could be no, but like, is there personalization in person activities and those touch points?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one, it's a lot easier because you're talking to these people, and it's easier to have a conversation when you like are talking to them face to
Mhm.
face, and you can see their reactions, you can understand their emotions and how they're sort of reacting to you. I mean, even on TikTok, there's a lot of brands that are now recording their sampling, and even their live, their in-person activations, whether it's like their their putting their product out at an event or something like that. I see that a lot at industry events where people bring products. At events I host, I get people's products to be served and to be sampled out. And usually, somebody from the team can come and talk to everyone and really get that feedback. There's this sake company that goes on TikTok that records all of their customer interactions at the liquor stores. Very fun to watch because you can see him like basically doing crowd work and figuring out like, okay, how am I gonna convince this person to at least take a sip without doing too much pressure,
Yeah.
but like trying to understand, for this relatively new and unheard of product to a lot of an American consumer base, what can I do to engage with them to get them to participate in something that I think they would like, and then also buy it and probably buy it again and again and tell their friends and build in that loop.
I was going to ask you, like, and you beat me to it, like any specific examples. But I guess going off of that, like, I love that example of taking something again offline and then showcasing that and then kind of amplifying that online. When it comes to just offline, do you know of anything offhand that's like different way of making that experience a little more memorable outside of just here try it, like trying the product, and the product's the thing that is the
Yeah,
difference.
that's a really good question. I think on like a smaller scale, companies like Velocity by Visor and Isle, where they enable sampling. Like you can go in with Isle, for example, you get an ad for half day teas. It says tea on us. You go into Target, you buy the teas, and then you send Isle the receipt. They Venmo you, and then obviously Isle gets that very interesting shopper data, and then you get a free drink. And the brand also gets to say somebody went into Target and paid full price for my beverage, and it moved.
Mm.
I think that's like a fun way, to get someone to try the product. And then there's this company that I used to interact with at my first job called Fuji, FOOJI.
Okay.
It's experiential marketing company that they basically do these drops. Usually it's around some sort of IP, so like a movie releasing or something like that, but oftentimes brands are participating in that drop. So maybe it's, Shang-Chi came out and Sanzo did that collaborative drink, that partnership on their cans. So you would like tweet at Fuji at a certain time, and then somebody would like deliver you a little kit.
Mm.
I remember I got a T-shirt once for
Very
some
interesting.
other Marvel movie. Another one that I also think is really good, also in this experiential marketing space, is Coffee and Clothes. They help put on experiential marketing activations from like a big Tanqueray bus that has a bar inside to like a beach party at a pool in Beverly Hills for Celsius. I don't know, making something up here. But I think that's also like a fun way to interact with the brand. This like experiential marketing scenario where it's like it's an activity to be with the brand.
And how, in your opinion, how important is that in a marketing strategy for specifically CPG brands?
I think it's important. I think it
Is it
depends
a
on your style.
necessity? Is it a
No,
necessity or no?
I
Okay.
wouldn't say it's a necessity, but I think you can get that experiential marketing benefit from doing something like scrappier, leaner. Rotten Snacks did something like this. They went to the Venice boardwalk and they were handing out candy and they were filming it and they were talking to people and just having really fun. They just had like a fold out table, a bunch of their products, and just interacting with folks. But it was more than just like a sampling opportunity. This was like they were creating content, they were creating an
Mm-hmm.
activity. I recently saw Immy Eats also is doing this in like Washington Square Park. They have somebody dressed up in an Immy, ramen noodle. Immy's a ramen noodle company, and they're dressed up looking like an Immy noodle package, and they were asking people like life questions. They weren't even asking them about brand stuff. They were like, "What is the meaning of life?" and getting like honestly very beautiful responses.
Mm-hmm.
And all these videos have hundreds of thousands of likes, tens of thousands of comments. So there's like other ways for
Yeah.
the brands to connect with consumers and sort of do these brand building activities that might not have an explicit ROI, uh, in more creative ways that might even be more impactful than some experiential marketing activations. The experiential marketing activations are great if you have a lot of money to spend and like you're really just focused on brand building and like that. Like for Tanqueray, that's great. They just need to continue to exist. They don't really need to
Right.
have an explicit ROI of what that return on that campaign would be. But for Emmy, like they need to do something that doesn't cost a lot of money but has a really high impact.
Yeah. And kind of let me stop you on that note, because
Yeah.
I think when I'm hearing about this experimental marketing, like from my point of view, it is, or I'm sorry, like the in-person events, it is on the marketing side.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're going to do this in-person event, and then how can we amplify it across a whole bunch of different channels to like make it
Right.
from, hey, we're talking to 5 people, now we're talking to 5 million people by amplifying this situation. Is there also a component of there's doing this for the ability to collect really important data to learn more about your product? And I assume yes, but like, can you talk through that a little bit with us? And what sort of data would a brand be interested in collecting if it were like that?
Yeah. I mean, it's really important for a brand to understand who their customers are and who their customers aren't. Uh,
Mm.
you know, as I'm building my own brand, like I want to know who's like for me, like on the site, for example, like I would love to know who's coming to the site, where are they spending time, what are they looking at, what are they curious about, then also where do they go across the web, what are they searching, what other websites are they going to, trying to understand this full picture of who might be the most interested audience. And in general, like I want to know what other types of products are they consuming, um, what price point of products, what category of products. Because if somebody's buying maybe, like, and you can build these customer profiles around what people
Right.
are looking at. I think there's a lot of companies out there that are pulling search data, and that's very high intent data. And for me, like that is the type of data that I would want to be looking at. That's like third party, not owned data to understand sort of where trends are going and what people are sort of what they have the appetite for. Um, it's that kind of actionable data that can be really helpful.
Yeah. No, that's great because at least I've been in several conversations now throughout this entire conference, and it is about collecting as much data about the consumer as possible. And I was curious on like if it really, how it changes when it's in person versus online.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in person, like that anecdotal feedback and that like emotional feedback and that emotional,
Mm.
I guess, data in this
Yeah.
in this case is really impactful because I think one for just like the founder and the person, if this is still a founder-led company, that like you get that emotional kickback, you get that added benefit of interacting live with these customers, and I think you can sometimes get them to open up a little bit more when you're in person and get like real insights into what they're buying, why they're buying it, what they sort of like about the pitch. If this is at just out in the Venice Beach, or out in the Venice Boardwalk, um, and then also like I think the content side of things too. You sort of get a lot of data from that. You can understand even looking at people some of your demographics of sort of who's engaging with you most.
Mm. Let's move on to like brand campaigns and AI. So I love that Nate has no idea what I'm going to ask. So let's see how this goes, Nate. But if since you've seen a lot of the progress of CPG brands and the shift, or maybe there wasn't any shift, but I guess my question to you is when you look at marketing strategies, brand campaigns in the last 12 months or so, have you noticed anything different when it comes to utilizing AI across the space?
Yeah. In terms of just like through the newsletter and understanding sort of like the more the news landscape, not necessarily what people are actually using. there's a lot of AI tools coming out, and a lot of the big ad tech companies and the big guys like Google, Amazon, Pinterest, they're all coming out with generative AI um, tools to improve product photography and create different variations to improve copy on site, and also to just like to what's the word to enhance the product pages on Google Shopping, or more importantly on Amazon. And then I've seen a lot of AI tools come into actually the space that you play into the CX world. I know Sienna just raised,
Yeah.
I think about let's say around $5 million. I think I've seen a lot of brands starting to use that and finding that really helpful. Um, I've also seen just a lot of AI on the back end too, supporting the supply chain and distribution side of the CPG world, where it's improving logistical challenge, fixing logistical challenges in distribution centers, for example.
You mentioned basically AI helping out with top of the funnel in the marketing and branding campaigns, AI helping out with CX and the customer support teams, as well as AI helping out with supply chain and logistics. So, yes, it's making an impact all over.
It's making its impact for sure. And I think now there's like I think when it first sort of was coming out, people were seeing it as this like, oh, this will just fix everything. But it's no, it's a tool that we will use, that we need to input our own thoughts and additional context into, um, alongside like whatever it thinks is right. Because I use ChatGPT as an aid sometimes, just to flesh out an idea, or sort of pull out context from a news article. Like I use Arc browser, and they built in ChatGPT into the sort of find search bar. So if you press Command F, I can be like, what are the key points on this page? Just like help you move a bit faster. But then also like there's certain things that just it makes sense that it's doing. You input a lot of data and say, here's some context, tell me what you see. And maybe for like ecom data in particular, it'll say something like this cohort of customers buy this thing the most, so we think this cohort of customers will buy this the most, so you should A/B test a email campaign running this promotion to this cohort. Whatever it may be.
Yeah.
There's countless opportunities for AI to be supportive in the first party data that any brand might have.
There really are. Um, Although I'll say on the supply logistics side, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Only because I don't know as much, and I'm going to make an assumption that the audience would like to learn a little bit more, because that's something you don't read too much about, at least, of how AI is making an impact in supply chain. What have you
Yeah.
read or what have you seen that is developing around that?
Yeah, so I'll say my knowledge is still pretty surface level, maybe a little bit deeper, just that like I know it's happening. Um, but I've seen it a lot on the on the tools that help manage supply chain logistics for like a Flexport or UPS,
Mm.
or a shipping company. But also on the side of different 3PLs, and managing like the robots in these distribution centers. So I'm pretty sure Amazon had an article recently about one, these two new sets of robots that are coming in, and how they're also basically operating on what they're calling AI. They didn't really go into much detail on what that means, but being able to manage a lot more on their own and make decisions might be a stronger. It's not Terminator, but make more nuanced choices,
No,
I
you're
guess.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think I don't know, like there's so many decisions made on the inside there, but maybe that's a conversation with like ShipBob or something like that. But I know actually I was talking
You
to him
talked to
recently, and
Casey
they were
about that.
really, yeah, they're really investing heavily now
It
into
makes
it.
sense.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it makes sense because it's a lot of like this goes here, that goes there. There's nuances that you can throw in, but generally speaking, I'm sure it's like the perfect tool for that sector,
Mm.
more than anything. But I've also seen like, you know, AI being trained, to visually identify, bad produce in stores, and help, move product faster. Like there, it's all over, and it's just, and as we feed it more data, and as as the tool sets become stronger, it's just going to be in every section.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit about influencer marketing, especially with CPG brands. I think this is super interesting because um, personally, I'm starting to see it all over the place now. And I finally think that CPG brands are really starting to, this is number one or number two marketing strategy kind of moving forward. Um, I guess from your purview, is that correct? Like, do you think that you see all these CPG brands really trying to utilize as much as they can about influencer marketing? And what's the future there in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, I think we're moving away, and this has been happening for a while, but we're moving away from like sending product and engaging with some of the bigger names, and going more towards these micro influencers, whether or not they're even like explicitly related to your product. Because let's say you're doing a hydration powder, you kind of can work with a lot of different people because everyone drinks, and you can kind of just incorporate it into a lot of people's lives. Maybe they're doing dancing TikToks. Well, they're going to drink, or they're doing commentary YouTube video. Well, an ad roll for them chugging some waters, like that makes sense. Or if it's just in the background, like I
Mm.
think, you know, some of this could be ads. Like this is where there it's couplet coffee. It's her mocha pot. I think like that type of influencing is also happening. I've noticed that a lot in a lot of the YouTubers I watch, and even some of the like more lifestyle TikTok videos that come through. It's more naturally integrated into a lot of creators because now there's so many more creators and so much content being put out that there's it's easy to find someone who has a small audience but a big reach, and a great, and like a better return than going to a Kim Kardashian, for
Mm.
example. I think,
Now,
yeah.
I was just going to stop you there, Nate, because I think what comes up and what I've heard and love your opinion on is that I guess the way that it's been talked about is like you have. Let's actually talk about retention really quick. So you have brand, and I think there was the subject of okay, you outsource your support, you outsource your even customer experience. And then it was like, well, if we do all that, we're kind of getting away from our brand, and it's really hard to bring those together. And so now you're seeing a lot of brands trying to figure out, okay, how can you utilize outsourcing, or how can you utilize just this team and be very brand centric? And I bring that up because I want to talk now about the influencer marketing, which you were just talking about, which is that is it hard to control then the branding element when you have all these influencers that don't really know much about your brand, but you are paying them to talk about it, and that control is left out. Do you hear from CPG brand? Is that a problem? Is that a challenge, or is that not even talked about now?
It's definitely a challenge. I don't think it's talked about as much anymore. I think everyone's focused on raising money. But I mean, I honestly, like, my I've had a sponsor recently, and it's this week's sponsor as well, mini social. I think this is like a very natural plug actually. But I think there's like a lot of platforms like mini social that basically help these companies manage this UGC and manage this pool of talent, this really big pool of talent, and sort of keep
Mm-hmm.
it in all, this one unified place, rather than keeping it in like a spreadsheet and trying to interact with all these people. Because there's so many micro influencers, and you kind of, I'm not going to claim to be uh, the most knowledgeable about influencer marketing. I'd say like friend Gendel or Sarah Gross would be a lot, they know influencer marketing. But from what I've seen, like it's, you can work with a lot of smaller influencers, but that means a lot of managing, and you could lose your brand in the process. And I think like a tool like Mini Social makes a lot of sense because it's a lot easier to sort of spray across a wider net, but still manage your brand image, and manage it across all those influencers.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I just I bring that up to kind of bring together the customer experience because again, like one of the challenges that brands have faced in the last few years is to like make sure that the entire customer experience is it just flows really well together. And you
Right.
go back and you're like, okay, we got these mini influencers, and it's all about top of funnel and getting eyeballs, and then you kind of get away from the branding element of it, which is fine. And in my mind, it's a similar challenge and problem with the back end of like, okay, customer service. All right, we just have to answer the questions. We're going to do that offline here, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting like to see how it's going to change. I think in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people are also like very quick to drop an influencer if it doesn't make sense. Um, Especially when you're working with so many, you always have options.
Yeah.
Really the key for a lot of these for a lot of these brands using these influencers is user generated content. They want things that look real, that look like a person using it and who is excited to use it.
I think the last thing I want to ask you about before we end here, Nate, is more or less your thoughts on what's to come for CPG brands. There's a lot going on when we were talking about AI, customer experience, the marketing campaigns, investing. I guess in your opinion, what's the biggest challenge that CPG brands face now? I think in the next year or 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they're facing a lot of sort of issues, a lot of
There's a lot.
funding. There's a lot of issues. I think a lot of brands are having a hard time scaling efficiently because for the past couple of years they didn't really have to, or
Yeah.
they probably should have, but they didn't. They were told otherwise, and there was an environment where funds were easy to come by and tools were relatively cheap, and it was a little bit easier. But now there's a lot of competition. Consumers are watching their wallet. They're reducing spending, um, and I think right now it's like for some of these brands, it's just a waiting game until either they sundown, get acquired, when that acquisition is probably just them shutting down. Um, I think right now I think the issue is how can these brands grow and scale most efficiently as they possibly can,
Yeah.
without burning too much money, without giving up too much equity, without losing their brand in the process, and also not getting lost in just branding, in just pretty packaging and these shiny object syndrome, but actually focused on like what is making them money, pivoting when they need to pivot. It's hard stuff, especially when funds are tight.
And sorry, the answer doesn't have to be customer experience because I want to be truthful here. It like where do you then really think about like what do you think about then if you're a CPG brand when it's about scaling efficiently? Like again, it's not you can't just put money into Facebook right now and like that's
Yeah.
the answer. So is it like okay, how do you you have certain customers, how do you like actually retain them, or is it more on like really
100%.
understanding the customer touch points and like making it we were talking about experimental marketing before, is it making it so different that it's like that's how you're capturing the attention? Is that it's just a process or
It's a whole process. I mean, it depends on the size of your brand. It depends on your product. If you're, some brands have it a little bit easier where it's sort of built into their product type that retention is more of that bigger thing. Like I'm looking at a Taste Salute packet, hydration packet. That's kind of built like you want that consumer to buy that very consistently. You want that on subscription. You want to keep them in your brand ecosystem. With beverages, a little bit harder D2C, it's expensive. You want to sort of push them into retail, harder to have them buy bulk, bigger quantities of that product. So, it's hard. It's very hard. But luckily, I think there's a lot of different ways that these brands can grow efficiently. It just depends on who they are. Unfortunately, there's not I think one solid answer. But I will say, in terms of the retention piece, which I do think is really important, your best customer is one you already have, both in terms of brand advocacy. I tell people about brands all the time. Obviously, it's partially my job, but the brands I really, really like, I don't let them forget that I really, really like them. And they will buy them, and then they really, really like them. And they tell me that they like them, and they tell somebody else that they like them. That's why retaining your customers ends up being, such a huge value add, because they're your biggest advocates, the people who are buying from you already, and who want other people to buy from you as well. And that takes a lot of different touch points. That takes touch points on social media indirectly. That takes direct touch points through email, through SMS, through live chat, through sampling as well, and then through the different forms of marketing, from the big marketing activations where you're just trying to remember that brand, or the brand's trying to make sure you remember them, and then also trying the product again and again.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. Nate, thank you so much for the time that you've given us today. And for those listening again, Nate, it's expresscheckout.co, right? Do I have that right?
Yes, .co. Couldn't get .com.
There we go. Hey, the truth comes out. Again, thanks for the time. Sign up for that newsletter, especially if you're a CPG brand. And again, Nate, we'll talk to you later. Thanks.